Hey y'all, you're listening to Word on the Street, an OML and RRC podcast.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to Word on the Street, and another episode in our Growing Up Mixed series. My name is Shawn Landock. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a junior accounting major, and I'm also one of the 10 student inclusion educators with the Office for Multicultural Learning, along with the Rainbow Resource Center. And I'm also a triplet, and I actually have one of my two triplet brothers here with us, Sam.
Hello, my name is Sam Landock. I use he, him pronouns. I'm also a junior, and I'm a computer science and engineering major.
And I'm also here. My name is Jonathan Mari. I use he, him pronouns. I am a junior MIS major.
Awesome. So we in the first episode of the Growing Up Mixed series, they talked about this one question and I thought that we all experience this question a lot as well in our lives. And that question is, what are you? Because one thing we all have in common is we grew up mixed, and this is a question that I've been asked a lot, and to the point where it's gotten a little annoying. What do you think?
Yeah, I've definitely grown maybe a little slightly numb to that question. You know, I don't identify myself like when I hear that question, I'm not attached to it as much anymore. I kind of focus more on who I am as a person more now, just because I've no direct concrete link to any specific race or anything like that. So I sort of got used to that question a little bit.
And I'm sure you've gotten that question all the time.
Oh, quite a bit. Growing up in the South, for the people listening, I'm from Arkansas, and with it being a very predominantly white state, it was a very common occurrence for a lot of people to, as soon as they see me and like see any of my family, they'd go up and they'd ask, like, what are you? Where are you from? And sadly, another question that came along with it is, why are you here? So it was an interesting time for sure.
Yeah, the question "what are you" is really like, I don't know. This question actually got me involved with the OML because my experiences because people will come up to me, Sam, and our other brother Seth, and will say, "Oh, like, what are you?" And it's hard to fully answer that question because I'm a lot of different things. So I'll just go down the list. I'm Filipino, Cuban, Italian, Polish, Irish. Like I can't. It's hard for me to say one. And what I've realized that from this question is that like knowing that race is a social construct, and just knowing that when someone asks you what are you, and because they can't figure out what race you are, they're in a way trying to find what category to put you in, and that's something like that I've experienced and learned, and that question ended up leading me to figuring out how to deal with that issue, and that was how I. The long story short of how I got involved with the OML. And I think it's important to note that, just asking someone, the first time you meet someone, saying, what are you, it's not always appropriate to, like, say that, like, ask that question the first time you meet someone. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. That question just comes up a lot. It's hard to, like, go on the list and everything, and yeah. But I don't know. I'm really interested to hear more about your experience of growing up mixed in Arkansas, being Black and Latino in Arkansas, and I'm sure that you have a lot of stories to share with us. So I'd love to hear more.
So the pretty basic rundown is that there's pretty much two sides of where I grew up in Arkansas. It's literally called North Side and South Side. With North Side being predominantly white and then South Side being predominantly Latino. And there's a big rivalry between the two. Like, they do not get along very well. And with me being Black and Latino and going to school in the North Side in the predominantly white neighborhoods, it brought up a lot of issues. There was many times where in my high school classes, even my middle school classes, I just experienced blatant racism in the middle of the day. Teachers did not care. I've been called pretty much every slur in the book. There was a group of kids that once they found out that I was, my mother is from El Salvador, and once they found out about that, they referred to me as immigrant for the rest of high school. Like, never used my name. It was always like, hey, immigrant, if they ever wanted to talk to me. And so that was a really interesting time. But I can never say it really got to me because my father, like, whenever we moved there, he did tell me that they might not be as welcoming here as they were because I moved from California to Arkansas when I was very young. And so I was technically born in Santa Monica, but I consider myself growing up in Arkansas. And he told me that people around here are not as welcoming to people of color. And so pretty much from the get-go, I had like a different mindset about it because I learned to take away the power from the word, because someone can call me anything they want. It's up to me to whether or not I let that affect me. And so over time, it just progressed into, I pretty much just saw it as not a joke, but I was kind of like laughing at them for being so ignorant instead of like taking it as like an offensive term. I was just like kind of sad for them that they had to stoop down to that level. Right. And so like there was one time obviously hunting is a very big thing in Arkansas, and I went on a youth hunting trip with my father, and obviously he couldn't come along with like on the actual hunting trip. He's on the older side and he couldn't keep up with the hike, so he stayed behind, and they sent one of the youth program leaders out there with me. And as soon as I got in the car, he looked at me and he looked me dead in the eyes and he was like, "You're not from around here, are you?" And I was like, "Oh, well, I came from a city not too far from here. It was a couple-hour drive." And he was like, "No, that's not what I mean." He's like, "You don't look like you are from around here." And then he's like, "I can tell you're some sort of Latino." And I was like, "Okay, like, I don't understand what that has to do with anything. This is a hunting trip. It's not about what race I am." And from there, I wouldn't say that I felt threatened, but I definitely didn't feel as comfortable around him, considering that we're in the middle of the woods. There's loaded firearms around. So it was not scary, but definitely a little bit more on the uncomfortable side. But yeah, there's just a lot of experiences like that where there was this one group of kids. They were on the football team, and luckily I had a very supportive friend group that always had my back when it came to things. This group of kids, they found out that I was half black and half Latino, and they said like, "We don't accept your kind here," and they're like saying like, "Yeah, we're gonna find you after school," and like obviously proceed to fight. But luckily, like I said, I had a pretty good friend group back there, and they made sure that nothing bad ever happened to me, and so I'm really grateful for that.
Wow, yeah. I really appreciate you sharing all those experiences. I'm sure like they're very hard, but you also mentioned that you didn't really let it get to you, right? Because even though there was like this racism was all around you, but you were able to kind of just like keep the chin high and kind of like you said it never really got to you, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and I think something in a previous conversation that we had that that kind of stuck with me was how people kind of put everyone who appeared like Latino into like one category, or who appeared Latinx into one category.
Mm-hmm.
Could you like go into more detail with that?
Yeah. So I don't know if it's maybe this sounds bad, but just the lack of like proper education in like that area of the South. But pretty much whenever someone hears the word, like hears you speaking Spanish, there's the automatic assumption that you're Mexican. Like I've told people like many times, I'm like, "No, like I'm not Mexican. My mom's from El Salvador," and so like, "Oh, so you're Mexican." It just never really got through to them, and so like it just was on like a repeating effect of like every person that had the views of like putting everybody into one category. It was just blanket of you're Mexican now,
Yeah.
because obviously, like even in high school, people were wearing Confederate flags on their belts, on their phone cases, on their boots. People had it on flying off flags at the back of their trucks. there, like, people would in the middle of the hallway. There's a song by Johnny Walker, or I'm sorry, not Johnny Walker, by Johnny Rebel that was used during the Civil War, and it's Alabama Hard R, and they'd be playing it throughout the hallways, and so obviously there was a sense of blatant racism throughout the high school, and so everybody that held that view just had a blanket overview of all Hispanics as being Mexican.
Mm-hmm. And about, because it seemed like a lot of people just assume people from the Latinx community as Mexican, and I think Sam and I definitely had a different experience growing up mixed because we're not from Arkansas but from Los Angeles, but we still, I think we all got those assumptions. Like they'll either ask, "What are you?" Or they'll just assume you're a certain you have a certain racial identity, and I think I can say that Sam and I both have, like, people have definitely assumed our racial identity at times.
Yeah, well, not in Johnny's way.
Not in Johnny's way.
Definitely not in Johnny's way. If anything, it's more of maybe someone of someone who's Latinx or someone who's black will assume that we're also Latinx or black, which is welcoming too. It's like I do. It is nice to have that initial welcome and assume that I'm sort of with them.
Right. No, for sure, and that feeling of welcoming. I think because of, I think the three of us all have racially, like, ambiguous appearances, and, like, at least for me and for Sam and I, we were able to access a lot of different spaces because of that. Like, it was weird because people couldn't really tell what race we were exactly. Because of that, like, I felt like whenever I would enter a space that was predominantly white or predominantly Latinx or predominantly black, we would, like, I would feel comfortable entering those spaces, even though I wasn't fully that racial, like, fully identified with that racial identity.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it was like because I'm mixed race, it was hard to feel a part of those spaces.
Right.
Like, at the same time. So it was like, even though I was able to access and feel comfortable in other spaces, I definitely didn't feel like I'm one of them.
Right. Yeah. There's definitely, from my experience, there's no real community of mixed people. Nowhere where I can fill in that bubble on that standardized test, right? That's another thing. Like, standardized tests, I never, every time I would that would be harder than the actual test.
Yeah.
I would not be able to. I'd have to ask, like, my brothers, "Oh, what are you putting down?"
Yeah.
I'd go back home, ask my parents, like, what was I supposed to put down?
Yeah.
Right? We never, we never had a core race to ground us in.
Right, because there's, like, Caucasian. I didn't fully identify as white. There's Asian. Like, we're like 25% Filipino.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't know, because I was Filipino, do I put Asian? Do I put Pacific Islander? Like,
Yeah.
And then also saying, like, I think on the bubble, like, Hispanic, I didn't know how to, like, couldn't fill that bubble either, because even though, like, I was, like, a couple % Cuban, like, because our grandmother's from, like, her family's from Cuba, I didn't, like, am I Cuban enough to put down,
Right.
like to identify as Latinx?
Right.
It was, like, and to fill in that Hispanic bubble.
Right. Yeah.
So that was
Yeah. Am I enough to qualify for a race that is in my DNA? Like,
Yeah.
am I enough to fill in this bubble?
Right. Am I enough of this category to fit it?
Yeah, to fit in. Yeah, definitely.
But I don't know. I think when you were saying that there's no one like mixed race community, I guess now that I think of it, it's like I think the identity you most identify with, or at least in our experience, is like what like the side of the family you kind of surround yourself with the most.
Right.
At least with our mom's side of the family, the Filipino side of the family, we most of our family from our mom's side is with us in Los Angeles, while my dad's side is still on the East Coast. We definitely still like surround ourselves with like the more Filipino side of the family. So
Right.
so I think we probably connected to our Filipino identity the most.
Yeah, I mean it's also, I mean, yes, we're surrounded by our Filipino family, like family gatherings, funerals, weddings, whatever it may be, but it was never like a core part of our immediate family, and so when we go into those gatherings, where we'd say hi to all our infinite uncles and aunts and cousins.
Right.
That didn't see us till we were yay tall. I always felt out of place. Not sure how to address them properly.
Right.
Not sure how to comfortably carry myself in that Filipino setting. And I mean, and that's also a part because our sort of family, it was like Filipino identity was pushed down.
Yeah, it was pushed down a little bit, and that had a lot to do with our grandparents' immigrant experience.
Yeah.
Because both of our grandparents came from the Philippines around, I guess, World War II, and
Yeah.
And our grandpa, he just, as soon as he got to the United States, he was just working, picking multiple jobs, and that's where he met our grandma. But and when they started their family, our grandpa was working all the time, and our grandma just wanted to fully embrace being American, truly wanted to fit in, because she experienced racism too.
Right.
I was telling Sam the other day that I remember a story of our grandma. I think she was trying to find a place to stay, like a motel or whatever, and she comes in asking for a place to stay, and the person at the desk says, "Sorry, we don't serve Orientals." And I think because of experiences like those, she was driven to fully embrace being American.
Right.
And she was also working too. She was in addition to taking care of her family and working, she also got a master's degree, right, in I think business administration.
Right.
So she's taking all these things. So I think she didn't necessarily. Not only was she trying to embrace being American, she also our grandparents didn't have the time to pass down the Filipino identity
Right.
to our mom and her siblings.
Mm-hmm.
So growing up, when me, Sam, and Seth, when we were growing up, we didn't really experience as much of the food, the language, the culture. So we didn't we didn't really grow up with the pancit and the adobo, or we didn't learn any Tagalog really.
No.
But when we would go to the big family gatherings with all of the cousins, the aunts, the uncles that we've never seen since we were yay tall, as they always say it, we were able to experience it in those few moments, and this is awesome. I wish I could experience this more. I'd love to visit. I'd love to visit the Philippines one day, and and hopefully one day we'll be able to go. But it's just, even though the Filipino side of the family was where we connected to the most, it definitely wasn't because the food, the language, the culture wasn't necessarily translated down the generation due to the immigrant experience.
It was the generation they were trying to survive.
Yeah.
They're trying to feed a family of 5. They didn't have time for they didn't have time for anything. They were.
Or a family of 7, because
five kids, yeah, and that plus them 2, so family of 7. And it's we get those tastes, we get a taste of that Filipino welcome, that community, only on like the rare occasions, the sad occasions of like a funeral maybe, or so it's really not the most ideal, but super grateful for when we do get that chance.
And I think another part of our mixed race identity that was kind of pushed out a little bit, or that we didn't fully recognize, was the Cuban, and because our Cuban side of the family is from our dad's side, and his I think our dad's mom, her family, her father, her parents came from Cuba, but the whole family from her side all came to Massachusetts, and there's one brother in that family that stayed behind, and stayed behind in Cuba, and we didn't know our they stayed behind in this past Thanksgiving break. We were able to somehow there was a member of our family that we just never from that family that was lost back in Cuba, found their way back. That family found their way back to the United States, to Los Angeles, and found our dad and reached out to him. So then there was this time over Thanksgiving break where our families our family and my dad's newly found cousin and his family, we all got to go bowling together, and our good friend and roommate Jaime, who's from Spain, was the translator between my dad and his cousin, which was it was a fun time, but it was interesting because until then I didn't we didn't find anyone from our family that I don't know, we couldn't really connect to that Cuban identity as much, and until that moment, and wow, it didn't feel real until we actually saw someone from our family who really was Cuban, and I don't know, it was just a really cool moment for me.
Yeah, and it was a really special moment for him too.
For our dad.
For our dad, but for our dad's cousin.
Yeah.
It was such a such a happy reunion of families, and then in the name of family, not necessarily in the name of racial identity.
Right. Yeah, and it's cool to see oh, this is a part of me, it was able to.
Right.
Yeah. So I think it's on the theme of us having multiple racial identities. What have been all of your experiences like connecting to each of those identities? Was could you connect strongly to one over the other? How did your experiences kind of shape how you see yourself among all those racial identities?
So I'd say it was pretty, I wouldn't say easy, but it wasn't exactly a difficult task for me, because obviously my mom's side of the family is partially Salvadorian and Mexican married in, and so growing up, I would visit Los Angeles a lot in South Central, and I'd visit my cousins, and I practically see my cousins as not as cousins, but as a brother and sister, and because we did so much, every time I'd visit, we'd do everything together, and so every party or anything like that, I felt really welcome, and obviously everyone there speaks Spanish. Everyone there is either originated from El Salvador or Mexico directly, or is the son or daughter of them, and it really brought it into perspective of I feel welcome in a Latinx area. And on my dad's side, it was also the same thing, because recently, I can use an example, sadly I wish I couldn't use this example, but with one of my uncles passing away a couple weeks ago, during the funeral, it was mainly the Mari / Bourdonnais family, and everyone there, I knew everyone as a familiar face, and I didn't feel out of place. Even though my skin color wasn't as dark as the majority of the people there, it was it was not difficult to feel welcome or at home, but that's just within my family. And now going into like public spaces, especially growing like in Arkansas, it would be completely dependent on whether or not I knew the people beforehand. Because if I knew the people beforehand, if I walked into a room and I recognized people and I knew them as good people, then I'll be like, okay, I can feel comfortable in this area. But there has been multiple times where I walk in, like one of the examples is I walked into the locker room one day. Like I played soccer in high school, and I walked into the locker room, and I didn't know any, like the football team was notorious for having a lot of very aggressive racist people. And so I walk into the locker room and I look around and I don't recognize anybody, and they all just give me this, like, because the locker room's shared, like I had just as much right as a soccer player to go in there because my locker was in there as well. And so I walk in, and 3 people that were born and raised in Arkansas had very, very conservative values, and like one of them is very blatant on social media about how he does not believe in the fact or in the idea of race mixing. So he knew that I was half black and half Hispanic, and when I walked in, he looked at me and just gave me this like death stare, like why are you here? What are you doing in here? So it for me it entirely depends on if I know you, but within my family, I guess that was the original topic. It never really was difficult for me because I grew up on both sides. I had a lot of experiences with both sides of my family. So whenever I'm in a Latinx function or any like party or anything like that, then I feel really, really welcome. I try, there was never a, like, even though I don't speak fluent Spanish, there was never the idea of, oh, since you can't speak Spanish, you're not a part of us, you're not one of us. It was never like that. And going to the Maury Bordenave side, my father's side, there was never the fact of like, oh, even though you're a lighter skin color than us, you're not one of us. It was always just, we're just one family, and there was never any like difference between us, I guess, in my eyes at least. So.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. Like you're able to like, I don't know, when you're with your family, you're very, you're able to connect very well to your black identity and your Latinx identity, but when you're entering like other spaces like locker rooms and classrooms and just like and these different spaces where there are people that you didn't know, you didn't have that same feeling of comfort. But yeah, at least for me, like I think Sam and I kind of talked about this a little earlier, but yeah, I don't know, kind of goes along with being able to access spaces as well, because I was I was able to access many different spaces, but I didn't feel a part of them. And because like I don't know, when someone asks me, well, like, what race are you, what are you, and I go down this list, it was very hard for me to like, it would just be a list, and I couldn't really pinpoint one. Like there wasn't really one racial identity that I could like fully say, oh, like I am this, this this is me. Just even though I was experienced with I guess predominantly with my Filipino side of the family, it was definitely still hard identifying myself as Filipino. It was a little difficult, but.
Just one thing that I wanted to share as well regarding the last point. Every time that I say that I didn't feel comfortable, it was with it being in the South. It was never really a mental or an emotional sense of danger. It was predominantly a physical sense of I could physically be in danger, because in that culture in the South, there's not really a sense of like talking trash, I guess. It's fights are very common. There's steel-toed boots, they hurt, right? Everybody out there is not afraid to get into a physical altercation purely based off your skin color. I had a couple friends, with me being half black, there were only 2 other people in the school that identified as black. and it was Tayshawn and Daquan, and they multiple times had to fight their way out of like situations. Luckily, they were bigger guys, so it went their way. But it was never a sense of like, oh, like I'm getting like emotionally attacked. It was always the sense of I could physically be in danger in this scenario. Like there's no coaches in that locker room. When he looked at me, I was like, okay, like this could end very badly, because he was quite a bit bigger. He was a lineman. He was quite a bit bigger than me, and like and recently actually last year, just to highlight how dangerous it can be for people of color within Arkansas or the South in general. My high school's baseball team, a large majority of them got sent to juvie because they had a new player who was a person of color, and within that same locker room they tied him up and they started like beating him, and afterwards, like I don't know, the reports were that they were drunk, and because like it was like an after game celebration, and afterwards they went to Walmart. They bought the largest like package of like cotton swabs that they could, and they drove around the city finding people of color and throwing the cotton at them, calling them all sorts of racial slurs. So I just wanted to put that into like perspective for people listening, that it was not an emotional or like mental like danger. Like you weren't scared of being like thinking about this in a week and thinking back of it. Like if you were in the situation, you were scared for your physical body that something could happen.
Yeah.
So.
And because you mentioned that you like you've been in situations with like you've been in fights before, like you, and so I'm sure with that perspective, like in that, very rough environment of like, there wasn't the emotional mental emotional discomfort of entering a space. It was actually the physical danger that could happen at any moment. I'm sure because of that, I'm sure the obviously the words are being called racial slurs and that, I'm sure that's not fun either. But I'm sure the feeling of physical danger was definitely on your mind first before I'm sure you're able to shrug off the words a little easier when a fight wasn't happening, or I'm sure to put into perspective, because people because you not only have you been called racial slurs, you've also been in fights, and
a word's a lot easier to get over than a black eye. So
I don't know, that's very that's very surprising to me. I'm sure Sam too, because we growing up in Southern California, we haven't experienced that at all, to the slightest. There's
not even a little bit.
Yeah, there are people that on social media that make racist posts, and I think that there's at a school nearby, we're close to where we live, there was a big deal with someone who made a prom poster for asking someone to prom in high school, but it had it was an acronym that that spelled out the N-word. That was the biggest thing that was I think the biggest moment of racism that we experienced in high school, I believe. But at least in comparison to I don't know what you were saying, because obviously that a poster that's horrible, but having that something being common, and people throwing cotton at people of color and tying up one of your own teammates.
Yeah, it was the baseball team. They tied up one of their teammates after a game, and they recorded everything, which was just vastly dumb on their part. But what do you expect from people like that? And they tied him up. They started beating on him as they said it was a joke, but obviously it was not. And they had some serious repercussions, thankfully. Most of them are in prison now, and the ones that didn't go to prison got expelled.
Oh.
So.
Yeah, because how did you have any certain experiences because you were saying that that the other the other black people at your school would had to get into physical altercations, and is there anything that you experienced because of your racial before being mixed race, because I'm sure being like, I'm sure being mixed race wasn't very common where you were.
There, in total, it was a predominantly white, like vastly predominantly white school. In terms of the Latinx like population of the school, I think maybe 15 max at that school.
People or percent? Like,
people.
Oh.
And then obviously for like the black side of things, it was 3. There was none. So there wasn't really, like, all of my friends were either, like, I was friends with Shawn and Daquan, and then one of my good friends, Hector, he was also from El Salvador, really good friend of mine from on the soccer team, but the majority of my friends were white. So it was always an interesting reaction, like, whenever people found out that I was mixed race, because it would always go one of two ways. They'd either be perfectly fine with it, or I'd get a really nasty look, and I'd never hear from them again. And so there was multiple times where I was in a friend group, or not a friend group, I guess, like, I was making a friend, and then the topic of race came up, and I was like, oh, like, I'm half black, half Hispanic, and he gave me a look, and I was like, all right, I'm not talking to you anymore. So, because I just didn't want to surround myself with people that thought like that.
Yeah.
And luckily I found a really good friend group, like JR, Ethan Compton, really good guys, and they were always there for me. They always, like, stood up, and luckily, like, neither of them were afraid to fight. Like, if they had to stand up physically for one of their friends or for themselves, they were willing to do it. So I never really felt, when I was with my friends, I never really felt threatened, but it was just those times where I was by myself and, like, in a new area where, like, I didn't know anybody, and it was a predominantly white space. I really wouldn't feel like it was the safest or most welcoming place.
And you've told me before that, you know, you grew up not too far away from where the KKK was founded.
Mm-hmm.
Like, was there a, like, by being, like, mixed race, like, in like being black and Salvadoran in Arkansas, like, near near that place, I'm sure, like, just what was that experience like? Just kind of like in that area.
Well, I never it was founded in Harrison, and whenever we obviously steered clear of that entire town, because it was never really, like, so Harrison is where it was founded, but quote unquote founded, but the really racist town is right next to it. It's a little town called Zinc, and that town is nationwide notorious for being one of the most racist places on earth. Like, it is. If you step in that town and you are not white, you are in physical danger from the moment you step in to the moment you leave. Like, people will steer clear of that town at all costs. It's a very small town, but all of them, like, it's practically a cult at this point of how they're still in relations with the KKK. Because Harrison, they're trying to rid themselves of the stereotype of being associated with them. And because a lot of people there, there's been, like, anti-KKK protests. So the people of Harrison are trying to work on, like, fixing their reputation. But obviously it's been so many years that they've allowed it that the damage is already done. Like, people are going to avoid your town. But I mean, I didn't have any direct contact with any of the clan, thankfully, or else I might not be here. But I did see, like I said, along with, like, Confederate flags, I've seen, like, the cross of the KKK on, like, phone cases. I've seen it on backgrounds, people doing it as jokes, and I've seen the merge versions of the two, with the Confederate flag with the KKK cross, and the topic, like I said, people would be playing, like, the KKK, like, they called it, like, the KKK anthem, which was, like, a lot of Johnny Rebel songs, like I said, like Alabama Hard R, and, like, they'd play it, and they'd be like, yeah, like, it's a good song, and, like, the stuff like that. It's, like, it's quite literally talking about, like, the time period where people of color were hung in the streets. And they're like, yeah, it's, like, it's funny, like, yeah, racism. So I never had any direct contact, but I definitely got the influence of being in an area where like racism is treated as like lighthearted. Like it was never treated as like as serious as it should have been, because like we're talking people that have lost their lives over this, especially with the KKK. Anything involved with that group, it just involves hate, death, and everything of the sort. So it was, I got the after effects of the Klan. I never got like a direct contact with them, thankfully. So.
Wow. Like, that's a lot different from Redondo Beach, California.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna ask a question to just the whole group. You know, what was the moment or what were the moments you were most aware of your, you know, racial identity, more specifically your mixed race identity?
I guess, I mean, when I get that question, like, what are you, right? And I would always try to, like, when I go through the list, it was always like, okay, which one might stick the best to this person, right? Which race, you know, would resonate with them, that would give me the most favor, you know? Which one should I say first? Which one should I say last?
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, okay, like, maybe if I get the order right, like, I can present myself better to someone. So.
Well, we've never talked about that, but I do the same thing too. Like, I'll list like, I'll list certain things first depending on like who I'm talking to. But, yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, that's the main times where I think about it. Other than that, though, it's definitely, like you mentioned before, like, being able to go in many different spaces, but never truly a part of them. Yeah.
Yeah, I think another moment, like, moments where I really experienced my racial identity, I think, like, there's two questions that when the three of us, you know, Sam, Seth, and I, when people are meeting us at the same time, they'll say the two most common questions that come up are, one, what are you? And two, or not really a question, but another thing they'll say is, oh, you two look the same, but this one looks different. Because obviously we don't have our cameras on right now, but Sam and I look very similar, and Seth looks different. And when people like notice that difference, like the biggest physical difference that Sam and I have to Seth is the color of our skin. You know, Seth just has, like, Seth looks like us. You could tell we're all brothers, but Seth just has a lighter skin complexion. And whenever someone says, "Oh, you two look the same, and this one looks different," it not only puts like you and me in a certain category. Like it kind of, I don't know. I've definitely felt the feeling of me and Sam in one category, and then like as like the twins, and then Seth, because people say like, oh, like people refer to Sam as like my twin, and then Seth would be like the third triplet, because it not only isolates Seth from like the two of us, it also puts you and me in in the same category as like the same person.
It groups us. I mean, that's also like another, like a triplet kind of categorization. You just, you know, put the three together. Why, you know, it's a unit.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, people will categorize us, but then within the three of us, they'll also like split us up.
Yeah.
And it's
a layered. It's like a layered prejudice.
Yeah, it's a layered grouping. So people will say, oh, the triplets, the Landocs, you know, like first they'll group us like that, and then like within that group they'll say, oh yeah, like you and Sam, you guys are twins, and then Seth's your other brother. Like the people have said that way too many times, and it's sometimes a little like offensive, and like it kind of bothers me a little bit, because it's like, no, we're all triplets, we're all, you know, all born on the same day, all came from the same mom, you know.
Yeah, and sometimes that, like, even other people, like, you know, making that that distinction between you, me, and Seth, it kind of influences me to think along those same lines, right? Like, okay, now maybe I'm like not noticing the similarities between me and Seth, or like us and Seth, because the only difference that I've ever been made aware of is our skin complexion.
Right. Yeah, and because whenever someone says, "Oh, you two that look the same, this one looks different," I'm like, "Okay, I know what you're talking about."
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I wonder what physical quality
Yeah.
is making us look the same and making us
Right,
look different.
right.
Like I wonder what you're talking about, and
Yeah.
you know, so
Same conversation and it's not just once, not twice,
every time
thousands.
it's been thousands of times.
Thousands of times with the same conversation. I'm trained. I'm numb. I'm numbed to that conversation.
Mhm. And whenever I'm meeting people by myself and I mention, "Oh yeah, I'm a triplet," actually they'll say, "Oh, like do you all look the same?" And what I'll say is, like instead of saying, "Oh, yeah, Sam and I look the same," and Seth has like I don't say this. I don't say, "Oh, Seth's like more like lighter skin." Like I say Seth looks more like our dad, right?
Right, yeah.
Like I'll say Sam and I look the same, and Seth looks more like our dad because it's true. Like when people like. Sometimes people like don't even think we're like brothers. Sometimes people will say like, "Oh, like this one must be like adopted." Like people and when I was younger, like I thought like there were a couple times where that thoughts crossed my mind before.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, our tone, our skin tone is like yes, I know it's like it's our Filipino side. Maybe it's our Cuban side that came out, right?
Yeah. Because we're a lot darker than our
we're
parents.
we're a lot darker than not just our parents, but all my mom's side of the family and any member of our dad's family that I've ever met.
Yeah, like we're definitely like when we look at ourselves and any person in our immediate family or any person in our family that we've met, like we're darker.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
and so it's like it was also. Yeah, it was just definitely a noticeable difference, and
It's like there's no one in our family that we can be like, oh yeah, like I got this from them, or more, enough. I mean, maybe our late our late grandfather,
right.
But even then, not really.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's definitely when like the comparisons with the two of us versus Seth is really kind of what. In addition to saying what are you, like those, like whenever you meet someone, that's just what happens every single time, and almost every single time. So it's because whenever people come up to us, they'll just assume that we're like the two of us, like the three of us will all be together, and they'll assume okay, these two are twins.
Right.
These two are we look very similar, right? And yeah, these two are twins, and they'll sometimes they don't even like think Seth's our brother, and
Yeah.
And no, we'll say no. We're actually triplets. Like, wait, what? Yeah, this is the third one right here. Like,
Yeah, the one right next to us.
The one right next to us is
Yeah.
is the third one. But so like when people are saying, "Oh, are you triplets?" Like I love that when people actually recognize
get it
it,
right. Yeah.
When people get it right, like, "Are you triplets?" So that's my.
Yeah.
Because everyone just assumes that we're twins too.
Yeah, it's definitely like nice to hear that too.
Yeah, because that just it just shows that that we are mixed race, like how even though Seth looks Seth looks more like our dad, but like our mom, like we don't look a whole lot like our mom, but like there's definitely features from the both of them that we take features from both of them, but Seth is like almost a spitting image of our dad,
Right.
and we're like kind of like a combination of the two.
Right.
And like just showing how just like our appearance versus like Seth's appearance definitely shows like how like our mixed race identity because so it's just that's just definitely like a big moment.
I guess another thing is like being mixed race, like, and we were never really taught how to grow up into being mixed, right? Like no one teaches you how to be mixed, right? Like maybe you've had experiences being white, maybe you've had experiences, right, being Filipino, right? But no one says, okay, yeah, this is what it's like to be mixed. And so I guess that's why we're having this podcast right now.
Yeah. And I think I'm really liking this conversation, and I think like hopefully we have more because like I want to like be able to like get in touch with like other members of the mixed race of the mixed race community here on campus. Like whether like if anyone's listening right now, and then and wants to reach out or whatever, or be a part of the podcast too and talk about their experience. Because when I thought, because when I jumped on board onto the mixed race podcast or the Growing Up Mixed podcast, I knew like the first two people that I thought of and having this conversation with are the two people that I live with right now. So it's and I'm sure there's a lot more. So yeah, and I think I think that's, I don't know, I have a couple of other questions for you guys before we wrap it up. But one is, how do you feel about the term mutt, referring to someone who's mixed race?
I mean, so for me, this is probably gonna be, not an anticipated answer, but I'm not really offended by it. Whenever, like, being mixed, being a mutt, right, like, I kind of always took it as, like, being the best of such beautiful racial identities, right? Like I took the best from this, the best of that. Like, these are all beautiful origins, and put them together, and that's me. So I was pretty proud of that sort of how I am, how I came to be, right? But I do understand that it is, it's not it doesn't have the nicest of connotations,
Right.
But I mean, I'm just grateful that, like, for being raised in that sort of, like, gratitude and consideration for ourselves. Lucky to be in an environment that's, nurturing and not as harsh as John
As Arkansas.
as Arkansas.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You're good. So for me, I'm kind of along the same lines as Sammy over here. Whenever, like, my mom would even call me this, because, like, obviously it's in a loving tone. She's like, oh, like I'd ask, like what am I? She's like, oh, you're a mutt. Like, you're half black, half Hispanic. Like, I never took any offense from it from the beginning, because, like I said, I've always been proud to tell people what I am. Like, if someone asks me, like, obviously, like you said earlier, it shouldn't be the first thing that you ask someone when you meet them, but whenever someone does ask me, as long as there's not a negative like presence in the room, I guess, like, if or like the tension isn't there, if I feel comfortable with that person they ask me, I'm proud to tell them what I am. So, like, if they want to, if I'm considered a mutt, then I'm a mutt, and I'm proud to be one. And so, like, growing up for me, it was never really an issue being called that, because, like Sam said, there's two beautiful racial identities I just happen to be the product of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think our mom would refer to us as mutts as well, and at first, like,
she would say it a lot. Yeah,
she would actually say it a lot. On one side, it's like, okay, I don't necessarily like being compared to a breeded dog, but at the same time, it was that's not, like, that wasn't that on that side. It's not very nice, but I also really, like, it was fun thinking of myself as different, like, kind of like saying, oh, I'm unique. I'm different. I'm, like, because I'm mixed with so many different racial identities. I'm a unique person. I'm like it made me feel like I'm special. I felt proud because, like, not besides Sam, who looks almost exactly like me. There's not except for my carbon copy. There aren't many people who are like us, who are like me, who are like us, and even though, like, it's being different, but it was a good feeling being thinking of myself and having other people thinking of me as different, as and being, like, it was just, like, while there's so many challenges of finding, like, connecting to one racial identity, to entering different spaces that that you don't feel a part of, or as far as, like, in Arkansas, being, like, spaces where you feel in danger. Besides those moments, like, I'm like I'm so proud to be mixed race. Like it's like, I don't know, it's nice, like it's nice being different. Like I'm proud of that identity. I'm proud of, yeah, just proud to be a mixed race despite like certain challenges and everything. I don't know, any last thoughts from you guys?
Well, I gotta mention what Seth would say. Seth calls it biracial privilege. You know, there's honestly, like, yes, there's a lot of like figuring out who you are, your place, but it's also like it's also such a blessing. It's such a unique blessing, and yeah, all like it just going back to the word like the word mutt. It's like, I mean, as long as it's in a nice tone and you know the intentions of what they're trying to say and it's not offensive, it's like, you know, I know what you're trying to say because I'm trying to figure it out too.
Yeah.
Right? And we're all trying to figure it out. Yeah. And we're having these discussions like these to figure it out.
Right.
And so,
but at the same time, like maybe the word mutt isn't as like well received, like wouldn't be as well received to someone else, right? Someone else.
No, yeah. I mean, that's my experience is different from another listener who's tuning in, but yeah, it's I you know, again, our mom uses it on us all the time, so I am very well conditioned to that word.
Exactly.
I mean, just the biggest thing is just like Sam said, I am proud to be mixed race. I have like two cultures that have endless amounts of things that are great about them, and I get to have both of them, so I consider myself pretty lucky, to be honest. The food is really good. I can't say that. The food is really good.
The food is really good.
But yeah, no, I'm proud to be mixed race, and luckily, like I said, I made it out of Arkansas. Don't plan on going back. It was not really the most enjoyable time, but I had a great family out there. Yeah, my mom's side of the family is predominantly out there, so like my grandparents, they're from El Salvador as well, so I had a very supportive and nurturing family and a really good friend group that not only like physically protected me when needed, just was always there to. They never saw me as like a different person. I was just Jonathan to them. And so just really thankful and, like I said, just very proud.
Yeah. I think before we close it off, I have one last thought, and I think it's shown like it's a good example of how I've grown into my mixed race identity. Is growing up, I think, well, all three of us have like very like thick curly hair. Mm-hmm. Growing up, I didn't like it because I wanted to be able to control it. I wanted to be able to control it. I didn't like the curls. I wanted to do something with it. I wanted to like comb it over. I wanted to fall in front of my face. You know, it didn't look like anyone's hair that like that we were like.
I wanted head bobbing hair.
Yeah.
For concerts.
We wanted head bobbing hair for concerts, but I think at least recently, I could tell with Sam and myself, because before I used to try to like keep it wet, like keep it gelled up, try to like make it like have that like straight look. Now, like I think we're both like throwing conditioner like in our hair, like letting the hair grow. We're like, you know, whenever I get out of the shower, I've been leaving conditioner in so like it gets all nice and curly. So I don't know. Before I didn't used to embrace the curls. I didn't like the curls, but now, like I don't know. I can say with at least Sam and I think.
Yeah. No, I completely agree.
I think we've been like. I've been embracing the curls, and in the same way that I've been embracing my like mixed race identity.
Yeah, I've been growing out my curls. I need someone's got to teach me how to tame them.
Yeah, we're still learning how to control the hair a little bit, but we love it. Anyway, that's it from us. Hope you enjoyed listening. Thank you for tuning in to hearing our experiences of growing up mixed. All right, thank you.
Thank you.